Please give it up for Audrey Tang and Vitalik Buterin.
So, good afternoon, everyone. Yeah, so I guess, so first question, Audrey. So before this, you were the digital minister in the Taiwan government, and since then you have stepped down from that position. And so I'm curious, what are the token and ICO projects you're advising? Because I want to know what to buy.
Well, there's no shortage of tokens and coins that wanted my advice. I have not yet agreed to advising any of them, so I have not received any tokens. So far, it's been kind of boring. I've been receiving, as part of my senior fellowship of Project Liberty, a lot of new Taiwan dollars. So at the moment, that's the only coin I can suggest, but that may change in the future. So my turn to ask you questions?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. Yeah, so earlier in our talk, you mentioned that you got canceled on social media, like more anti-social corner of social media.
Yeah.
Was that really a cancellation, or was it a kind of backslash? Was it, how was it like? What was the actual situation?
Yeah. I mean, it also like reminds you what I got canceled for, right? So this is a mask. So I can put on the mask, right?
Okay, you get
there we go.
burned for putting on a
so
mask?
I'm wearing it, right?
Okay.
So I put up a picture of myself wearing this
Okay.
and having this, which is a CO2 meter.
Okay.
So what CO2 meters do is basically the more CO2 there is in the air, the more you're breathing in air that's breathed out by other people. And so the more, the airborne disease risk is. And then on airplanes, before they take off, it's like crazy high. And so it's like actually pretty wise to, like wear one of these things for at least like that short duration. And, I took a selfie with this and, people just like, basically, said all of these things about how, Vitalik is in cahoots with the World Economic Forum, which, of course, is like a long-running meme because 2 years before this, I had posted a picture of myself eating cricket crackers, and which were like, they're actually not that bad, right? They actually taste like flax seeds. So, there's like this whole meme of like, like I'm in bed with, the global elites and all of this stuff. And like basically, lots of people are like, no, ETH is like a beta soy boy coin and I'm selling all my ETH. And so, it didn't actually get canceled in the sense of being fired from anything, but it was just, it was still like, it's one of those experiences where I feel like, you're not the Twitter equivalent of a real man until you've like been through one or two of these. But it was still really interesting to see that dynamic going on. By the way, right now the CO2 is like only in the 600s, so I think actually it's like totally fine to not wear this.
Yeah, it's also easier for the AI translators.
Exactly.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right, your turn.
Yeah. So Audrey, so how do we invite you to Farcaster?
Oh. Yeah, it's a nice decentralized platform. And I actually tried logging into Farcaster and it didn't work, so I switched to Supercast. And I thought that these are like very different interfaces, but they're actually sharing, right? The same activity stream. So I just made my first post at OGT on supercast.xyz, which should propagate to Farcaster, right? That's the whole idea.
Propagate it to the Farcaster network where it will be accessible on Supercast and Warpcast and Firefly and and Flink and whatever, and the clients that you code up tomorrow in the hackathon that you guys are going to organize right now because I told you to.
Okay, so great. So that's one check mark.
Amazing. Well, welcome to the decentralized world. When they say the singularity is near, remember the plurality is here.
Yes, and in the plurality world, we of course want to build bridges. And the situation you described was on Twitter, right?
Yes.
Okay, on x.com. So in your ideal world, when we have deployed this full bridging technologies, when we have successfully implemented broad listening to understand the differences and also the intersections of those differences and so on, like what is your ideal world? Like in ideal world where all the decentralized social networks have implemented the plurality ideas and protocols, what will happen to you instead when you post this, your photo wearing a mask and everything?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's like a couple of different, I mean, like parts of the answer that stand out to me, right? So one is that I think, the internet needs to have ways to speak with levels of loudness that are in between a private conversation and it immediately being blasted out to the entire internet and treated as this like mega public statement. And that's like something that I think, we had more of back in the days when the internet was run by like forums, but it's getting harder and harder to have more of. And I think just the fact that we're starting to move our civilization from this global water cooler approach to social media to something where you have different platforms, and you have different platforms that have different interfaces, that have different ways of filtering and prioritizing content, that select for different things, even have different rules in terms of like what the limit is on how many characters you can have. Like that by itself, I think, is going to move us toward something healthier. And like even inside of Farcaster, I noticed this, right? It has this feature called channels, which you can think of as being like basically subreddits for Twitter. And it's like a very simple feature. And like, I definitely don't think this is going to be, the thing that solves democracy or whatever, but it's like, I can actually have deeper conversations without, like lots of people, like retweeting everything to, like quite that same level, right? So yeah, volume is one aspect. And then the other aspect, I think, is this whole, like bridging concepts that we talked about, right? That, community notes has an implementation of, and, I think there's starting to be more and more implementations, right? This is the idea that, like if, like getting 2 votes for something should be worth more if those are 2 votes that normally disagree on everything else, right? Because if you have 2 people that or even 10,000 people that always, like make the exact same statements on, and like have the exact same opinions on everything, then, either they are, either they're just bots that are all controlled by one account, or, they are people, but that are still basically, being like influenced by exactly the same media sources. And so, it's like, if you think of democracy as being about information gathering, it's like, well, it's not really, 10,000 different sources of information there, right? But if, you see people who have, like all kinds of different views on all kinds of different things that like actually agree on something, like that's when, you actually know that like there's, like something real here. And that's something that like community notes as like the algorithm is designed to promote this. I've like designed, like I think Gitcoin has even used versions of quadratic funding that operate on this kind of principle. So like those are like examples of things that I would want to see more of, I think.
Okay, so personalized bridging, value detection device, and personalized filters seems like a metaphor with your detector and masks, like
yes.
equivalent technologies for social media.
Yes.
Okay, great. Your turn.
Yeah. So, hold on. I'm trying to remember what are the things that we wanted to go through.
Sure. Yeah, we're talking about the bridging bonuses, which is really a core concept of plurality. The idea is that it takes a lot of energy to go across different cultures, different languages, different tribes, and so on. And so people who make such efforts need to get more bonuses.
Yeah, so speaking of intersection and bridging, so you, Audrey, are someone who talks, who is very close to a lot of these circles that talk about things like improving democracy, improving government, civic tech, and close to like a lot of, obviously spent a long time being part of the government of Taiwan, and very close to other like policy and political characters. But at the same time, you've also spent quite a lot of time with like us crazy crypto people. And so, why? Like, what to you is the connection between these two groups?
I'm sure that there's also crazy civic tech people too. There's different sort of craziness.
There's definitely crazy uncivic tech people that arguably have been running the show in many countries.
Yes, and I don't think craziness is that bad. It often takes a really crazy idea and you implement it in like one far off corner of the internet, and then you take that crazy idea and the other crazy idea from the other corner of the internet who don't usually speak to one another, and you combine those two crazy ideas, and suddenly you have something that actually works. I think a lot of the co-creation that we have seen, for example, the idea of quadratic funding, as you just mentioned, it may start from a place, a governance system that has kind of completely no connection to a actual territorial jurisdiction. But once it happened somewhere, like in Gitcoin and so on, it's no longer seen as crazy by the territorial jurisdictions. And then we can point to something that really happened on chain and say, oh, let's use normal civic technology. And so we don't look crazy because there's someone crazier that has already tried it and tried out all the different wrinkles and so on and made it work. And vice versa. I mean, if there's people who think that they can run for the Tokyo governor by asking everybody who have an idea to call a AI clone of himself and co-create a platform that, by the way, become the top-rated platform, that's kind of crazy, but it worked. And so once it worked, then people from the other part of the world can just point to that direction and say, no, maybe that's not that crazy after all. And then you can try it in your corner of the world as well.
So one of the core ideas in my post on DIAC from last year, right, is this vision of like topics like security and defense that's explicitly focused on like being freedom preserving and being democratic, and not making the assumption that there's like already some like pre-agreed small group of people that understands what's true and false and what's good and evil. And these are ideas that I think come very naturally to like people in the crypto space. But I wonder, from a government perspective, right? This is something that I think. This is not how many people in the government are used to participating, are used to thinking, right? A lot of the time when people in the government think about like topics like national security, the underlying model of national security is basically, we know what is the safe thing and what is the dangerous thing, and we'll make a, like a centralized decision to, block out or attack or do whatever else to the thing that, like we consider dangerous. And so given your experience in the government in Taiwan, I'm curious, do you think that like this more open and democratic approach to like info defense, cyber defense, other forms of defense is something that might actually get like broader buy-in from government and society here? And if so, how could that happen?
Okay, I will answer that question, but I will note that it is actually two consecutive questions from you. So I will first ask you a clarifying question. When you mentioned this kind of defense acceleration, one part in your blog post says that this kind of coordination technology must be democratic in order for it to work with the pluralist idea. And so, and in your question that you just posed to me, it seems to imply another set of coordination technology that are not democratic, autocratic, or however you want to call it, right? So a clarifying question, like what's your kind of reference class for non-democratic coordination technologies, and why that is not good? Why it's not part of the ACC agenda?
Yeah, I mean, so I think, one is, there's, quote, like social credit scores, and like also definitely, corporate credit scoring systems that exist in Western democracies as well. Then another is in, I think, like Nick Bostrom, I believe, like wrote about this, and like people who talk in, in the effective altruism space that talk about the, like the vulnerable world hypothesis. A lot of the time, the ideas that they have is like, oh, everyone should have to, like wear a freedom chip, or around their neck that like records their actions, and there would be some kind of, like wise, super intelligent AI that can constantly constantly detect any kind of threats. So I think like some of those would be examples of coordination technologies that I would consider not democratic. Then, I mean, even just like social media moderators like unilaterally deciding that like this particular account is like bad for community cohesion and like we're going to block them. That's also a coordination technology, and that's
I see. Right. So then to your question then, I think those solutions, those top-down technocratic solutions, I think the reason why they have no market in Taiwan is that Taiwan had 4 decades of martial law. We've had our experience in this kind of very top-down control in the name of protecting national security, and the democratization of Taiwan was that of kind of very, very gradual, but people struggled a lot over generations to get more and more liberty and more democracy that comes with that liberty. And so people, I think, in Taiwan largely can just point back to like 40 years ago, 30 years ago, and so on, and say that, oh, look at all those excuses that they used to use at a time to impose top-down control and things like that. And because these are still fresh in the memory of at least people who are like 40 or 50 years old or older, there's still fresh memory of these kind of excuses and also the harm that it brings to the society. And because that's part of the lived memory of Taiwan, and which is why whenever we feel that there is a need to come to like common defense, resilience against polarization and things like that, we don't immediately jump to this national security and the government absorb more power in order to defend against an enemy, things like that. But rather, we jump to the point where we need to have societal resilience by having people generally understanding what really is going on and have this kind of antibody of the mind against the polarization attacks and so on.
Are there any like interesting live examples you could point to of democratic coordination technologies of the type that we talk about already being deployed here?
Yeah, so we talked a little bit about the ecosystem around COFAX, and I did mention the Trend Micro, the GoGoLook, and so on. And so just yesterday, I introduced to Vitalik this idea of Mrs. Checker, mrschecker.app.com, which is a new product that is a notification manager for Android phones, because I'm sure that Apple is still working on the kind of sandbox for that kind of notification handlers. But at the moment, it is possible for someone to install essentially a local edge filter, like a mask that handles all the different incoming messages from all those different incoming apps. And so the reason why that is preferred over like installing backdoors from the government to all the end-to-end encrypted connections and so on is that because it exists in a separate layer. There is choice and there is the freedom of coordinating across the different sources. So think like advertisement blockers, but in this time it's filtering, scams and phishing and things like that. Right, so my question. We talked a little bit about such bridging technologies, and we talk about this edge computing, edge filtering. And if we need to collectively train AI to, for example, make sure that the polarization attacks and so on get detected in real time, there's a lot of technologies that came from the blockchain world, zero-knowledge proof, multi-party computation, even fully homomorphic encryption, and so on. But none of this actually depend on a blockchain. All of this can run, maybe sometimes computationally intensive, so it doesn't yet run on the phone, but pretty soon, hopefully. So is a blockchain really needed? Like, is this just a kind of unreasonable constraint so that people can invent all those technologies and then we use those technologies elsewhere? Or is a blockchain actually warranted in some of those use cases?
Yeah, I mean, I think there definitely is an aspect to the crypto community which like goes further than blockchains as a technology. Like, if blockchains like somehow become impossible tomorrow, there's this entire set of other ideas and like even like other types of technology where I think like most of the space will just keep on like developing right from the next day, just with like some of these like other technologies as a core building block instead. So I think like there definitely is a big part that should not be underestimated of how like the value just is aggregating a lot of people around the idea that these are the values that we have, and we're also going to create this like very global and international like basically intentional community that's dedicated to the idea of building these mechanisms and like being willing to kind of go through the fire of testing them out and like getting them to the point where other parts of society can adopt them. I do think that blockchains do have a lot of concrete value, and I mean there's obviously like individual financial applications that we can point to, and people using coins to like store their savings and do international payments and all of these things that like I find valuable. I think the other underrated part specifically of blockchains as a technology is that I do think that there are important places where they can be useful even if you just think of them as a technical tool.
Yeah, I mean specifically in the realm of democratic coordination technology.
Right. Yeah, so one example that I can walk through that kind of ties all of the different types of technology together is online voting, right? So the problem basically is, like, let's say you want to have some kind of online vote. And let's say, for this kind of thing, I mean, we obviously don't want to, like go start having entire, like big nation state scale elections on this stuff because, computer security is still like improved but not yet good enough. Paper is, like very well tested and all of these things. But there's plenty of lower stakes things that you can start with. There's like quadratic funding rounds or petitions or local elections and so on. And so the requirements that online voting systems need to have are, one is like you need to have a guarantee that the result actually is, or the outcome of correctly taking into account people's votes and like summing them up in the correct way. You need to know that every vote that went in is actually a real vote that was made by someone who was eligible to vote. You need to also have actually a censorship resistance guarantee, right? So this is one of those places where like censorship resistance is like exactly the thing that this super important government application needs, right? Because like you don't want your voting infrastructure to be able to like block like targeted groups of people from participating. Then number 4, you need privacy, right? And you don't want everyone's votes to be public. And number 5 is that you want this very strong form of privacy that's called coercion resistance, which basically says you can't prove how you voted even if you want to make that kind of proof. And the reason you need this is basically to prevent like people from doing things like selling their votes, right? Which is something that I think like over time technology is just going to like also make easier and easier, right? And we have to try to stay ahead of. And so the way that these technologies can fit together, right, is that and like this is a system that's already like actually been like run and like live, and like it was even used for like the most recent Zuzalo like quadratic round. So basically the way it works is people submit their votes, and they submit their votes in a way that's encrypted. And it's like the correct way to do it is that it's both like the vote contents are encrypted and the sender of the vote is zero knowledge proven. And so basically no one knows who the sender is. But you still have a proof that like no one can like basically if you make two votes from the same account you get caught, right? Because that's how zero knowledge proofs work. The contents of the vote are encrypted. The votes are, there is a like backup channel to publish votes on a blockchain. And so like if you try to send your vote through a server and it fails, or if you want, you just go directly, like you can just publish it on a blockchain. And then there is a counting mechanism where there is some kind of party, which you can make it be, like the simplest way to do it is to make it be a single actor. But then if you want to like improve the trust assumptions further, you can add on trusted hardware, you can add MPC or FHE, you can even add MPC or FHE where each of the pieces is inside of a different trusted hardware. Like that, there is a computation that's done that basically decrypts the individual votes. And it also enforces this mechanism where if it detects multiple votes that came from the same person, right, remember, you can do this without like learning which that person is. then it automatically discards every single vote except for the first one. Right, and that's how you get coercion resistance, right? Basically, if someone bribes you to vote, you make the vote, you prove you made the vote, but then you just like separately go off and make a different vote, right? And then it basically goes through the votes, decrypts all of them, does those deduplicating, does this counting, and then publishes a result at the end, along with a proof that the result was computed correctly, right? And like to me, this example is interesting because it's like this really powerful, like end-to-end encryption or end-to-end combination of like basically every tool in the toolbox, right? Because you have zero-knowledge proofs to ensure privacy and correctness. You have, a blockchain to provide censorship resistance. You have just plain encryption to add, like extra forms of privacy on top. And then, you have MPC or FHE if you want to like decentralize the trust model for the coercion resistance piece even further, right? And so like a blockchain in there, like it plays a critical part, but it also plays a kind of boring part in the sense that like,
it's
just a tool that's doing a thing.
Infrastructure.
Exactly.
Right? It is something that withstands attacks.
Exactly.
Okay, so the boring part of
Yes.
blockchain. Okay, great. Any questions for me?
Yeah, I think, okay, so, so we've talked about the, like synergies that, the crypto world and, the civic tech and democracy world can have with each other. What are some ways in which, we as the Ethereum community can be more helpful to your space? What are some, like more things that we can do to, like help build and contribute to these democratic technologies that can then be applied far beyond our ecosystem?
Yeah, I often think the Ethereum community as kind of a higher temperature governance sandbox, so that you can try out more ambitious governance mechanisms and also test it under more adversarial conditions and things like that before people off-chain uses the same technologies to further democratic governance. And we talked quite a bit about how to ensure the social responsibilities really of community moderating, community nodes and things like that. So I would really welcome more hackathons, more different kind of like Farcaster or Lens or things like that, trying out this kind of governance. So like to make sure that this experience is not just a replica of Twitter plus channels, but also some sort of actually reasonable governance of how people decide, as you said, maybe not the underlying layers of protocols and so on, but also just the everyday like where to direct our attention, what kind of preferences there are, maybe tuning a collective recommendation engines together and things like that. And if it works on such smaller enclaves, then we have ways to scale it to the larger world and the civic tech world.
It's an excellent answer. Thank you, Audrey.
Okay, great. And now we have 2 more minutes. So we talk a lot about defense against biohazards. We talk about defense against cyber attacks. We talk about defense against polarization and things like that. But I also noted that in our earlier panel this morning, that I think it was Glenn who noted that when you interact with him and the wider social media community, like 90% or more was scam and fraud and things like that. Like, do you have specific suggestions, tips, examples, favorite projects that can enhance the resilience against that sort of hazard?
Yeah, I mean, I think in terms of like infrastructure, I think the thing that I like believe in and the thing that I've been advocating for people to build is that like basically I think we need the like the technological equivalent of a defense layer. And what I mean by that is like we need to have some kind of sophisticated actor that is like actually on the user's side and whose incentives are like actually directly aligned with like specifically helping and supporting the user, right? And not like some other goal that's associated with some project, right? And so I think I mean message checker to me is like a great example of that kind of like principle for like messaging. I think within the crypto space, I've been impressed that we've been starting to see more wallets that try to like automatically detect, like what is a thing that this transaction that you're about to approve is trying to do, and then try to give you warnings if they detect something wrong. So I think like all of those things are good. Another thing that I recommend to people, and like this is like at the level of personal habits, is I wrote this blog post in February entitled "Ask Security Questions," where I basically said like if someone like calls you or texts you or messages you and like tells you to like do something that involves giving money, giving authority, like doing anything irreversible, then like these days AI is getting pretty crazy, right? And like you don't want to trust them just because they have a familiar voice or even a familiar video. And so you can ask them like basically to just some random question about any shared experience that they've had. And like this is something that like, within the Ethereum Foundation and I use every day. And like it's already like helped us be significantly safer.
So instead of virtual reality, shared reality, shared lived experience as fraud defense. Thank you.
Yes, thank you.
And I think we're at time. Thank you so much.
Thank you.